Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast. Dr. Bill Kanasky here. This is brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. This is going to be a fantastic podcast, particularly for our audience members, and many of them work in the transportation industry, either as a trial attorney or you're a trucking company employee, you're a safety director, or even drivers listen to us. And our guest today, I found him through a couple posts that I saw online. And the moment I saw what he was doing, it really hit me right in the heart because, when I was in graduate school and gained my Ph.D. in clinical psychology, I did a lot of work in exercise adherence, dietary and eating behavior. And as you all know, I'm a major fitness and health nut. And my guest today is doing something very special, Mr. Mark Manera from Supply Chain Fitness. Mark, how are you?
Doing good, Bill. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited for the conversation. And I love talking about fitness. I love talking about trucking.
Yeah, well, it's actually a fantastic combo, and it really needs to be an important combo because we all know it's got the reputation of being one of the least healthy professions out there, because you got, obviously if you're driving, you have a lot of sitting. I believe the incidence of smoking and tobacco use is really high with drivers, and then if you're not watching what you eat, right, you got a weight issue on top of that. So that's really like the trifecta of really bad things. And what we need healthy drivers, and we need just healthy people overall in the industry. So let's start off by tell me a little bit about your background. I know you're a physical therapist, and tell me about your background. What got you into physical therapy, and then what made you make this crazy transition into a real niche market here, which is the transportation industry.
Yeah, so 3.5 years ago, I didn't know a single person in the trucking industry or supply chain as a whole. I was working, like I said, my background, I have a doctorate degree in physical therapy, and I'm here in St. Louis, and I was working in a PT clinic south of St. Louis in a rural city, and in walked in a bunch of truck drivers. And it was my first time getting to know a bunch of drivers on a personal level. And honestly, first time that I saw what 20, 30 years behind the wheel can do to someone's health.
Yeah.
And it threw me down this rabbit hole of the trucking industry. And, long story short, there was one driver in particular that really um, pushed me over the edge. And I can go into that story if that's something that's interesting. But long story short, just like what I ended up seeing as I dug deeper and deeper into the industry just completely changed the course of my career. And what you said earlier about one of the most unhealthy industries, I'd argue it is the most unhealthy. Highest rates of
Yeah.
obesity, highest rates of diabetes among any other occupation in the United States. And really the stat that struck me the hardest as I was initially looking into it was the fact that truck drivers have a life expectancy
Yeah.
16 years less than the average population.
That's
And
insane. That's insane.
it, it was crazy to me. And I couldn't even imagine like putting myself in, behind the wheel or in their
Yeah.
shoes of losing almost 2 decades of my life just because of my career choice. And for me on the healthcare side of things, like I don't think anyone's career should define their health, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what's happening in trucking, right? And honestly, when I first read that and when I first heard that, and I was seeing the people in the clinic firsthand, like it pissed me off, and like it
Hmm.
still does. And it was at a point of like, how could we just ignore this? And I decided I couldn't, and I started a corporate health company called Supply Chain Fitness, and really haven't looked back since.
That's really outstanding. Obviously, there's a need there, and it's a weird dichotomy of having people that are so important to our everyday life, right? Having the most unhealthy, right? Some of the most unhealthy jobs. Being able to make uh, such an influence, and I know it's probably in its infancy, and it has a ways to go, but I think that for you, it's been really so far so good. Yeah, I know when I came into litigation, from clinical neuropsychology, many of my family members and friends were like confused, like how, like I don't understand. Like, what, are you an expert witness? I'm like, no. I was like, I'm using psychology in this very unique area and having this like massive impact. Whereas if I would have just stuck to traditional psychology, just like if you'd be stuck in a clinic right now going through, some dude's total knee replacement rehab
Yes.
protocol. I mean, I wanted the dynamic nature of the field. I wanted to do something important and unique. And it sounds like that's something
Well,
that
yeah,
you're doing.
I had the same exact,
Yeah.
I really resonate with that because what I was doing prior to this was I actually had an online coaching company where we worked with weightlifters, power lifters, professional CrossFit athletes, and helped on the strength training side of things. And so what I was seeing was like, you know, yeah, it's cool to help Joe, put 5 pounds on a squat, but if I can help, Bill lose 100 pounds
Yeah.
and control his diabetes and be able to stay a truck driver and, support his family, like, man, the impact of that was, you know, so much more. And also, I just saw this huge gap in the industry, and to me, no one was really stepping up and
Yeah.
really building something specific for drivers and like just, putting the stake in the ground and, shouting from the rooftop of like, hey, this is a problem. We can't sweep this under the rug anymore. And like,
Yeah.
I'm here to build an actual solution and not just do lip service saying, oh, drivers are unhealthy, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah.
So I think I think I had two important points here. Number one, there's a driver shortage. So if we can
Correct.
keep drivers healthy, they stay in the industry longer. I'm not saying it solves that problem, but definitely, makes a dent in it. And then I think and this is an argument. I think a healthy driver is a better driver. I think a healthy driver is a safer driver.
Correct.
And so I think what you're doing is absolutely sensational and very important. Now, what I'm wondering, and I want to get into your program here in a second, go over the various services that you offer for your clients. But I know, like in my industry, and typically it's a little different because there's typically an insurance company involved that pays for my services and stuff like that. But I know that the number one barrier to my services is usually cost. Is oh
Yep.
yeah, like what you do is great, but we don't want to pay for it. We can't afford it. And I imagine that with what you do, there may be kind of an initial you know barrier of we have all these other expenses, and we really can't afford it. But can you talk to, because I always have to go around explaining the kind of the cost benefit ratio to my clients, like, hey, yes, it costs money, but here's all the value you're going to get on the back end that is very long lasting, that makes this a no-brainer from a value perspective. Kind of what's that kind of talk that you have when you first meet potential clients about the value of creating drivers programs for drivers that to make them healthier and to keep them behind the wheel longer and in a safer manner.
We're all friends here, right? So I'm gonna
Yep.
pull the curtains back. I'm gonna
Lay it
pull the
out.
curtains back and just like
Lay it out. Yeah.
show the entrepreneurial journey as well. Because
Yeah.
as I started this, I've learned a lot of lessons in the last 3+ years of just working at the B2B level of selling into trucking companies, and that is a really important part.
Yeah.
I think the mission driven aspect only goes a certain way, but if a company is wanting to make an actual impact, um, or like implement this, they have to have a business, they have to show the business ROI and cost. And when I started supply chain fitness, I looked at health as, it touches all these different areas of a company, healthier driver is a safer driver, less work comp claims,
Yeah.
health insurance costs,
Yeah.
productivity of, increased truck utilization from less days away from work, retention from less failed DOT physicals or less
Mhm.
medical retirements. And I was really trying to sell supply chain fitness as this, magic pill that was a solution for everything,
Yeah.
right? And when you do that, you end up selling nothing, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
what I was recognizing on the corporate health side of things was there's a lot of soft ROIs. I think there is definitely an ROI, I think it's just it's a little bit more challenging to point an arrow from A to B and show this is why this happened, or this is why we, cut down driver fatigue and then that caused less safety accidents. And what I was recognizing, and when I was speaking to a lot of, these VPs of HR and executives at different trucking companies, is that Actually, the industry as a whole has these chronic diseases like diabetes, like hypertension,
Yeah.
like obesity, really deeply embedded into the industry as a whole. And
Yes.
when you look at it from a health insurance cost standpoint, 86% of all healthcare costs in the United States are directly associated to chronic diseases. And so we're
Unbelievable.
actually it
Yeah.
it's absurd. When you
Astonishing.
look at it across the industrial
Yeah.
sector, transportation, warehousing, manufacturing, construction, the whole industrial sector spends over $540 billion a year on healthcare costs
Crazy.
directly associated to those chronic diseases, which is
Yeah.
nuts. And so what I was recognizing now, what we're moving towards, we haven't announced, so we actually started a new company that we're pulling supply chain fitness into is actually a chronic disease management company. And it's focused on working initially with self-insured trucking companies on the health insurance side of things.
Nice.
Also, some companies that are trying to become self-insured and mitigate some risk before taking that leap. And then also some industry specific captive groups as well, and helping them, them from a company standpoint, mitigate risk and cut down healthcare costs
Yeah.
um, by managing or preventing chronic diseases in their driver base. And the trickle down impact that that has is obviously, we know from a DOT physical standpoint, the number one and number two reasons from a failed DOT physical or getting handed a temporary card is uncontrolled diabetes,
Yeah.
uncontrolled uh, blood pressure, right? The chronic diseases. From a safety standpoint, the amount of uncontrolled diabetes and heart attacks that you see or strokes that end up, you know, being brought up in court during a nuclear verdict case, or I won't even try to lie about the legal side of things, but those are some of the things that get brought up from a driver's health standpoint. And what I was recognizing was that that is really the button that we need to go after, because
Hmm.
from a driver standpoint, it's what impacts their day-to-day life the most. And also from a cost standpoint, it is the thing that is, keeping HR benefit departments up at night, because there's just so many hospitalizations, emergency room visits, surgeries, and these healthcare claims due to these chronic diseases.
Yeah. The financial implications is just staggering. Um,
Crazy.
and so back when I was in psychology, and one of the reasons I left, right around early 2000s, 2000, 2001, 2003. I started my career in 2003, so a little over 20 years ago. Was I knew that as a behavioral scientist working with whether it be cardiologists, exercise physiologists, PTs like yourself, we could design the greatest exercise and dietary programs in the world, and no one cared. And the reason why was back then that was when that was the pharmaceutical company heyday, and it
Uh-huh.
still is. And unfortunately, the pharmacy is a lot more packed than the your local fitness center, unfortunately. And I say that to be a real problem, because it's really not solving the underlying issues, which are mostly behavioral. um, yes, I know genetics plays a role in certain conditions. I get that. I don't need to start a fight on the podcast
Yeah.
about that. I've had people yelling at me. Um, but as you know, some of the stats you just rattle off, it's like 9 out of the top 10 causes of death in this country are behaviorally based. I mean, and fully preventable. And you mentioned diabetes, the high blood pressure, which leads a lot of heart disease issues. So tell us, because I think there's three issues. I know that I'm very interested in when it comes to driver health, and then I do want to talk about because you keep saying it, and I totally agree. The industry, it's not a driver thing; it's an industry. Because trust me, I've been at headquarters to many of trucking companies, and it's not like walking into a health club. Other people, dispatchers are sitting there all day. There's a lot of just the way the industry, functions lends itself to a lot of unhealthy behaviors. But exercise, diet, but then sleep. I think sleep hygiene is the kind of, no one really talks about that enough, and we have the whole driver fatigue issue. Cover that
Huge
last, but
issue.
start with diet and exercise and some of the programs you offer, and talk about the importance of those, and what can be done to really turn the tables here on some of these negative health behaviors.
Yeah, so I mean, before I get into that, I wanted to just bring up
Sure.
like the pharmaceutical thing that you just
Yeah.
mentioned, right?
Makes me nuts.
I think that there's there's obviously it's a pillar of the solution, right? It's a
Yeah.
big thing. Some of these medications are life changing. It can help a lot of people, but when you look at the actual guidelines of a lot of these medications, it's take this pill and also make lifestyle changes. But people a lot of times
Yeah.
just read over that aspect, and you're
Oh yeah.
seeing it right now with the weight loss the weight loss medications
Starts
like
with an O. It starts with an O.
oh
Yeah, I know
no
it's been all over the news. Yeah.
I can't think of it, but
Yeah.
it also like the medical terms like GLT
Yeah.
one or something like that. Now that's gonna bug me. Regardless, right? It's like you take the pill, you lose the weight, but at the end of the day, um, you are also needing to make these lifestyle changes so that once you get off of the pill, you don't just go back to your regular habits that have been instilled into you and gain all the weight back. Right.
Ozempic. Is it Ozempic?
Ozempic.
Yeah, there you
Yes,
go.
Ozempic.
I
Oh
found it.
my gosh.
Yeah, I found it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up because on
Yeah.
the heart, high blood pressure, hypertension set statins are life changing, right? They are really amazing. Everyone who has high blood pressure should be adhering to their medication along with making lifestyle changes, right? And
Yeah.
so what we see us, what I really see the gap, especially for drivers, but I think it's in the industry, is really that white space between doctor visits, right? The actual
Hmm.
day-to-day life where these lifestyle changes are coming into play. And where we fill in the gap is our real three big pillars are what you mentioned earlier is like the exercise, nutrition, and accountability side of things as well. And I think that accountability thing is to me really where the magic happens. And we talked, before the phone came or before we started this podcast on, the inside their head, the mental aspect. And I
Yeah.
think having a coach is a really big important part of that. And I think there's
Absolutely.
also an aspect of having something that speaks directly to the drivers, shows them that, hey, we get it. We understand your lifestyle, and we're not here to, shame you for the fact that you sit behind the wheel for 12 hours a day and that's how you keep a roof over your family's head. That's not productive. Coming at a driver and saying, you're screwed because of that, right?
Yeah.
But if we're meeting them where they're at, we're breaking things down and giving them those bite-sized pieces that are like the highest leverage activities that they can fit into their day-to-day life anywhere they're at anytime. That's where we start to see some of these behavior changes happen. And then when you pile, some accountability in a relationship with a coach, which a lot of these people don't even have anyone in the realm of health or healthcare or the medical field that they can talk to or that they have a relationship with. And so that's kind of where we start is, when you get on board into off shift, it starts with a real relationship with your coach. Then we focus on giving you the one healthy habit that, our algorithm on the back end shows that is, setting you up for the most likely to be successful based off of your starting point, your condition, your long-term goals, and your lifestyle. And so from an exercise standpoint, that starts with being able to give them actionable advice on what they can do anywhere at any time. And so we've
Hmm.
got programs you can do in the back of your truck, outside of your truck, or at home. We have video and written instruction of me doing exercises in the back of the truck, showing them how to do it and giving them a resistance band. So all they need, they have all
Yeah.
the equipment they need, right? Because thinking, you need to find a gym is just an added barrier that,
Sure.
honestly stops a lot of people from getting out. And also, when I started this whole program, it started with me going into a bunch of trucking Facebook groups, which
Yeah.
is the wild west for someone who is not in the trucking
Oh yeah.
industry.
Yeah. Reddit has a few. I've been on the
Oh
TikTok
yeah,
ones. It's
yeah, yeah.
very unique cultural. Yeah, definitely
Well,
unique.
and it was awesome. It was
Yeah.
like an experience for me, seeing the people in the clinic, but then getting really diving deep into the industry. And I found 20 different drivers who beta tested our first program, which is just an outside the truck exercise program for drivers. And I was on the phone every single day or every single week with each member. And one of the members, her name's Blake. She's still a member today. She's actually become one of my really good friends in the industry. She said, "Hey, I don't feel really comfortable outside at the truck stops working out. I've got a bunch of people staring at me. And
Yeah.
then also sometimes it's really cold. And also sometimes
Yeah.
I'm not in a place where it's safe for me to
True.
be outside the truck.
Very important.
Is there any way we can do this in the back of the truck? Like, can I do this inside my truck?" And I was like, well, I never thought about that, but let's give it a shot. And so we built out the inside the truck program. And I'm glad I listened to Blake because it's
Yeah.
now our most popular program. It's the thing that
Oh,
drivers
I
are
imagine.
most excited about. And a lot of times it's a light bulb moment for them because they've never thought about doing something in the back of their truck, or they're like, this is way too small back here. I can't do anything. And so
Yeah.
we've got circuit-based exercise routines, we've got stretching routines. We also have some just accountability around going for a daily walk. That's, a starting place for some of these
Yeah.
drivers, right? And so, you know, some of the aspects also on the exercise standpoint is time is a really big variable for a lot of drivers. That is the
Huge.
biggest thing I'll
Yeah.
hear drivers say, I don't have time for this. Well,
No.
we've got things you can do in 5 minutes or less. I know for a fact you're scrolling through TikTok or Facebook for more than 5 minutes a day, and you don't have to drive anywhere new. You can do it right in the back of your truck. And we also have things, 10 minutes. We've found 20 minutes to be this really good sweet spot, especially for the circuit
Yeah.
exercises. But that's really an overview of the exercise standpoint. And then on the nutrition side of things, I think this goes outside of just drivers. I think this is just anyone in general. I
Anybody.
think a lot of people think when they're starting a diet or they're making changes to their nutrition, it needs to be this 180 flip in their whole lifestyle, and they need
Hmm.
to change everything. And start all these new things and hold on for dear life. And then, you set yourself up for this unrealistic, unsustainable change that you end up holding on for about a day, two
Yeah.
days, maybe a week. And then you're back to square one. And,
Yeah.
going back to the mental side of things, that just stacks a failure internally. You're like, I just failed this. And a lot of people, especially as they get, into their 30s, 40s, 50s, they've got 15, 20 failed attempts internally. That's how they feel. And they feel
Yeah.
as though it's not possible to make changes because I'm not a diet person, right? And
Well,
so, well,
they defeat themselves mentally, and then that turns out to be the biggest bear of them all.
exactly. And so what we do is we take a habit-based approach and we focus on like very actionable, high leverage activities that drivers can do anywhere at any time, and start with one habit that as it becomes a part of their day-to-day routine, then we stack other habits on top of it and really focus on the mindset of, hey, this starting place, can you see yourself realistically doing this in 5 years from today? And if the answer is no, then we probably need to start smaller,
Yeah.
right? Because I think a lot of people try to bite too much off, especially when you have the trucking lifestyle. But going back to what you just said, it goes past trucking. It is this whole
It is.
industry. The
Yep.
supply chain as a whole is a very hard, demanding industry, and it's really easy to put your health on the back burner. And so
Yep.
we, our bread and butter is drivers, but we work with the whole fleet. We work with the whole company,
Yeah.
from, executives to dispatchers to warehouse to dock workers to the drivers, which typically have the more difficult or more unique lifestyle when it comes to some of these changes.
Yeah, and that's fantastic because I do think it's an industry thing, and particularly if you have other people in the company, on board with this, that kind of helps everybody from a motivational standpoint.
Cultural
Um,
standpoint, exactly.
yeah. So when I was getting my PhD, and I still am kind of a research junkie. I love to read
Same.
the latest, research out there on fitness, general health. And one study that came out about 20 years ago, it's been replicated a couple different times. I think it's important for this particular topic. And again, this is for everybody, but specifically for the driver, could that have the pretty intense time restrictions, was that exercise effort and benefit is cumulative over the week. Meaning, so when someone says, well, I can't work out, an hour a day, 5 days a week, I just don't have the time, right? Well, number one, you don't need an hour a day, right?
Yeah.
And I know they've shown it's like there's like a minimum, I believe, which is about 10 minutes. And you start stacking 10-minute chunks throughout the week. All of that adds up cumulatively at the end of the week to meet your overall cumulative minutes. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes consecutive, which allows for a lot more flexibility in scheduling, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen the CDC throw out even 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're doing an activity that is moving, getting blood flowing, pumping your heart a little bit. It doesn't matter if that's, 2 minute extra or 10 minutes. It all stacks up and is accumulative, right? It'd be good to do it in a 5 minute chunk just because it's easier and it stacks up a little bit higher, quicker. But, I think what that does is it also gives drivers a really unique opportunity to fit these physical activity more into their day-to-day life. And so, habit stacking it on top of, before or after their pre-trip, when they're filling up gas, doing some stretches or doing a couple of laps around your truck, when you're getting at the truck stop, parking in the back, walking a little bit further. After you get done driving for the day, right when you put the truck in park, go in and go for a walk or do a little bit of, do some resistance band exercises and find those like anchor points in your day-to-day life where, you over time instinctually just say, okay, I did this, now I'm going to do this physical activity or I'm going to do this stretch. And over time that just becomes habitual and it makes a huge difference, especially
Yeah.
when you expand it on a consistent basis over a 10-20 year career.
Yeah. Now, okay, you're way too young for this. Okay, Rocky or Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
One of my favorite guys, by the way. I really, really like him. He's posted some things on TikTok and he's really, and Tulsa King's fantastic. I hope they come back with that. He's absolutely fantastic. He looks, I mean, he's like what, 74 and could probably kill both of us simultaneously with his bare hands. His worst movie was in 1987. And it was called Over the Top. This is,
Oh, yeah.
there's no, you do remember? Okay. So I
Yeah.
was gonna say, okay, so here's the right. So he's a truck driver and he's bouncing around, right? And he's stopping and he's getting into these arm wrestling competitions, right? That's like the theme of the movies when the money.
Yeah.
But do you remember the setup he had in the cab of the truck? Describe this to our audience because like he's driving this 80,000-pound truck and he's doing the arm wrestling thing with the spring device, right? It was like the old.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but his like arm was like he was kind of making a football field goal with his arms
Yeah,
at like his shoulder at like a 90-degree angle, and then just like doing an
doing the arm
external or
wrestling thing.
internal
Yeah.
rotation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking that if he got into an accident,
Well, that's my point, Mark.
yeah,
That's my point. So I want to make something
yeah,
very clear. I want to make
we're
something
not
very clear to
talking
our audience.
about when drivers are driving.
Okay,
Yeah,
two things I want to make clear for our audience because I want either of us to get sued. Okay, number one, you're a doctor of physical therapy. I'm a doctor of psychology. We're not medical doctors, so we're not giving medical advice. Number two, I don't think exercising while driving is something that you would necessarily think that's a good idea.
man, I'll tell you what though, when I was started this whole thing, I was on a webinar with someone. There was like a group of like three people, and there was a driver who was really into fitness,
Yeah.
and she suggested doing some breath work and like ab contractions while driving. And
Okay.
I was like,
Fair.
but no,
Oh,
and then she got into some other stretching and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, I no, let's focus on the road. There's a lot of time outside of when the truck's in park where your focus needs to be on the mirrors
okay.
and the windshield. Let's not
Listen,
even
I
focus on
gotta
anything.
admit, when I have to drive, I fly mostly everywhere. But I mean, yeah, do that little transverse abdominis, little vacuum hold, for that 30 seconds while you're. I kind of like that. Keeps the waist.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to say
I
if
know.
they get into an accident that I suggested that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my disclaimer.
Okay. So
Focus on
I
the
think
road.
that's cool. So let's say
Yeah,
mostly
yeah,
exercise for outside
yeah,
of the yeah.
exactly.
That sounds good. Now, as we know, and truck stops. I mean, the food options for these men and women.
Yep.
I don't know if you follow the women in trucking movements. Really, really
Oh
popular.
yeah.
It's fantastic. Ellen Voya has been on the show. She runs that whole group. The food options for these folks are very, very bad. I mean, it's what Hardee's, Popeyes, and McDonald's. Those are not going to work, right? How do you attack the dietary issue and snacking? Because I know I am positive because I do it. There are ways around this where if you play your cards right, you can actually extraordinarily healthy and really just avoid any of those fast food options.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the worst the worst enemy for a lot of drivers is the Dorito bag, the family size
Hmm.
Dorito bag next in the passenger seat,
Yeah,
and they're just like mindlessly eating, and then all of a sudden their hand hits the bottom, and they've got like cheese cheese dust on their fingers, and they're like, oh
yeah.
crap, how did I get here, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for, I had a driver who drank two 12 packs of soda a day
Oh
of
man.
Pepsi. But here's the thing that I empathize with is I can understand if you're on the road and that's why smoking is very
Yeah.
popular because you just want to do something, right? You're
Yep.
driving, and if you have a can of soda, I'm probably, chugging a couple of cans of soda as well if I have it in front of me and I'm
Yeah.
just bored and mindlessly drinking, right?
Yeah.
And so I think from a standpoint of like truck stops, fast food restaurants, here's how I look at it. I think I look at it very similar to the standpoint of drivers are sedentary for 11 to 13 hours a day, right? You can look
Mhm.
at the situation, glass half empty and just be like, poor me, there's no options, there's nothing I can do. Or you can say, hey, at anywhere I drive, at anywhere I go, there is a healthier option,
Yep.
right? I can go down aisle two and grab a protein bar instead of going down aisle one and grabbing a Snickers bar,
They're everywhere
right?
now, by the way. Well, first of all,
Correct.
I mean, my wife goes to Costco. I stock up, and when I travel, I have no less than 4 or 5 protein bars in my
Oh
bag in case
yeah.
of an emergency. But if you go to any gas station now, when I was growing up, it was just the Snickers, the Milky Way, the
Yeah.
Twit. There was 0 healthy options. But now they typically have a little section between protein bars, beef jerky, a lot of high protein stuff,
Yep.
and combined with, again, I did not have this growing up, a lot of real sugar-free options for,
Yes.
you know
It's
you
growing
know,
more and more.
yeah, and so the options are out there. I know that. So I think obviously educating drivers on how to choose wisely, but I would also think, and I'm wondering your experience with this is, particularly back when I was a student and I was poor, right? Like really poor. I mean, I'd pack
Yeah.
my own lunches. Um, and I'm thinking, what advice, do you have as far as, because I think what the drivers can do is do all this work ahead of time, right? And pack it in a cooler or whatever type of device they have to keep things fresh, where they've already
Yeah.
outlined their meals and there is no decision to make because you've made it before you even get in the truck.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have the mental bandwidth to do that, that's
Yeah.
amazing, right? I think it depends on the type of trucking, right? You've got like, I break it up into like, there's obviously a gray area here of like, you got your drivers who are home every night, local drivers. You've got, more regional people who may be out for a couple of nights, home a couple nights a week or once a week. And then you have the OTR drivers who are out for
Yeah.
weeks or months at a time.
Yeah.
There's some drivers in our program right now who live in their truck full time, right?
Yeah.
And I think it depends on what your circumstance is. To be
Sure.
honest, if I'm out for a week of trucking and I'm home for 48 hours, think it's going to be, I think that's a hard sell to say
Sure.
spend two of those 48 hours meal prepping, right? I know
Yeah.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of drivers who have spouses who really help out.
Sure.
And then the other aspect being there's a huge culture in trucking of like cooking in your truck. I've seen some TikToks, I've seen some Facebook groups of, man, I want an
Yeah.
invite to dinner at their truck
I've
because they're
seen
cooking
this. I've
steaks
I've
and
seen
they're
this. I've seen
yeah,
it's like a
it's a
tailgate.
tailgate,
Yeah, I
exactly.
mean, at
Yeah.
a bowl game.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Oh,
but here's the thing that we're doing right now is, we're educating drivers around we've got restaurant guides wherever fast food or whatever they're at. Here's the healthiest option at that restaurant. We do snacks of the week and truck stop guides of like, here's how to build a healthy meal at a truck
yeah.
stop. Here's some ideas on healthy snacks. We're also starting to dabble in ordering groceries for drivers where we
Oh,
connect to
wow.
their Instacart and sending and ordering groceries directly to the truck stop for them. And so we're really trying to find ways, I say like a push and pull, where, we're
Yeah.
pushing them and showing them the easiest options and breaking it down into those bite-sized pieces
Yeah.
while also finding ways to pull and like ordering groceries. So to make it as easy for them as possible to make their health a priority. And like how I look at it for drivers, I think there's just a lot of these contextual data points on a day-to-day basis that making the healthier choice is either harder, it's not as easy to access, or it takes more effort. And so, how can we use automation, technology, and our relationship to drop that barrier and make it as easy as possible for them
Yeah.
to pick the healthier choice? And so, we're looking for ways to do that. And I think there's more creativity out there as well.
That's terrific. Let's wrap this up with sleep hygiene. I mean, again, this is not it's especially important for the drivers, but again, this is not even an industry issue. I think this is a human issue. I think
Yeah.
we all suffer from it. And I don't necessarily think just popping melatonin every night is a good idea for the long
Yeah.
term. How do you tackle that issue? Because the driver fatigue in many of these accidents, that we work on in litigation is a significant factor, or at least it's alleged to be a significant factor. How do you tackle that issue?
Yeah, so I will say sleep is definitely an aspect of it, but it's not nearly as much in the forefront as exercise and
Yeah,
nutrition is for us. Just to be very,
sure.
transparent. But from a sleep standpoint, I think one thing we always talk about is like making sure people adhere to sleep apnea treatments, and if they are at risk of sleep apnea, helping them, recommendations on, getting treated and seeing if they have sleep apnea, but then also I think the environment is a big aspect. And so there's a lot
Yeah,
of habitual things that you can do around, cutting down screen time, going to bed on a consistent basis, waking up and going to bed on a consistent basis, which can be tough as a driver, right?
yeah,
Creating the perfect sleep environment in your truck, right? There's a lot of
yeah,
studies out there that shows, drivers get a lot worse sleep, when they're in their truck versus at home. Some drivers will say the opposite because their spouse is
Depends
is
on who's at
elbowing
home
them.
with you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, right. But finding ways to, get blackout curtains, using like white noise or putting,
sure.
headphones in so it's less noisy, keeping your truck cool, getting a nice mattress and pillow and comforters so you're comfortable, and as much as you can, getting a consistent schedule so you're not going to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning one day and 8 p.m. the next day, right?
Yeah.
That's what those things that mess you up. And so that's kind of some of the habitual things that we focus on.
Outstanding. Well, listen, man, you're doing a fantastic job. I wish you all the luck in the world. Definitely want to keep in touch. For our listeners, tell them where they can find you. I know you have a website.
Yeah. So supplychainfitness.com. We're on all social medias at Supply Chain Fitness, or if you're on LinkedIn, connect with me at Dr. Mark Manera.
And I know you have a podcast.
I have a podcast. It's definitely taken
Yeah.
a back seat. I think it's called. Oh man, now I'm I'm
You don't
losing.
know your own
It's been
damn podcast? Jesus.
yeah, jeez. Oh,
Hold on, I'll tell you.
okay.
It's Trucking Fitness Radio. I'm
Yeah,
glad
Trucking
I'm
Fitness
here.
Radio.
Jesus
Jeez
Christ.
Louise, it's been a long
Wow.
day.
Oh
I'm
boy.
sorry.
Wow.
I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
tell you what, you were just hitting the home run there and just
We're
approaching
gonna
the
we're
finish
gonna have to
line and
cut this out. We're gonna cut. I'm just
went
kidding.
into
I'm
a
just
guardrail and went off the road.
exactly.
But
Oh
I
my
saw,
gosh.
I
Thank you.
think you have like, let's see, you have 23 episodes, which
Yeah.
look really good, and that's part of your website. So we'd encourage our people in the industry to listen
Go check it out.
to that. And then any of our listeners that want to look at your website, listen to the podcast, contact you for to probably hopefully an engagement of some sort. So I think driver health is a major issue right now because of the shortage, and just because these are such important people, and them being healthier is a good thing for all of us.
Yeah, if a company's listening out there and you're self-insured on the health insurance side of things, or you're
Yeah,
trying to become self-insured, or you're part of a captive group that's trying to mitigate risk so you get more
yeah,
return at the end of the year, let's talk. I think there's a lot of opportunities on the chronic disease management side of things to cut down costs.
yeah. And we work with captive groups as well, and I'll definitely spread the word.
I'd love that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Mark Manera, Supply Chain Fitness. Thank you very much. And for our listeners, thank you so much for participating in this episode of the Litigation Psychology Podcast. We'll see you next time.